When someone lands on your profile or your post, the first thing they notice is not your words, it's your images. And in less than a few seconds, they have formed an opinion on what they think of you and your products. A great profile photo can make you look confident and credible, worth listening to, maybe even hiring. And a great photo of your product or service in action conveys a message. It opens the door, inviting someone to read your words, to remember you, and maybe contact you. A bad image does exactly the opposite. It silently turns people away. Think about it. Would you eat in a restaurant where the pictures of the food were colorless, dull, blurry? Probably not. But it's the same for you on LinkedIn, on your website, or anywhere you show up online. My guest today can help you fix that. Beth Perkins is a freelance photo retoucher who has spent 20 years refining her craft, including running 100 photo labs for Jessops, if you remember who Jessops were. And now she spends her time working with small businesses and professionals, helping them create images that pop. Today, she's going to share with us Editing for Impact, and it's free to download from our website. She will show you how to make your images look professional without hiring a pro. So whether you just want to put your best foot forward on LinkedIn, or you want people to take more notice of your products and services, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Beth, thank you for joining us today. You've got a long career in the creative field and particularly around photo retouching, which is your business now. Now, a lot of people who are watching or listening to this won't really know what a photo retoucher does and why it's important to someone on LinkedIn, for example. Tell us a bit more about that.
So photo retouching essentially is editing photographs. So you take your photographs, and what you do afterwards is you enhance them in some form. There's lots of versions of that. There's very small tweaks to make something just look a little bit better, but then there's creative retouching in marketing, which is taking things away and changing backgrounds and everything. So what I do is I work more on the lesser is better side of things, and work with photographers and small businesses to just make their images look as good as possible.
And why should someone, most of our people who watch this will have found us on LinkedIn, and they'll be engineers or maybe product designers or even finance people. Why should they care about photo imaging? Photo editing. What's in it for them?
Well, when you're looking at things like your profile photograph or your product photos, especially product photos being consistent, that's something that retouching is really big on, is creating a consistent brand across all of the imagery. So whether that's something that you do yourself or you get a marketing company to do or you get a retoucher to do, keeping it consistent is massive just to build trust with your brand.
Great. And I'm sure that we're going to talk a lot about things like profile images, because I guess it's probably the most common fingerprint that exists for the people that we're talking to. And one of the things you've taught me is that you have about 1.7 seconds for your photograph to make an impression on the person that's watching it. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
So that's kind of that's this very specific. The average usually is set out in the industry is about 2 seconds, and it really depends on social media that you're using as to how that translates. But yeah, you've got no time at all, because if you think about what you scroll, if you're a scroller or if you're on any kind of social media, even LinkedIn, the first thing you see is your image. Your image is your first hook. So before the words, the image is the thing that people see, or the video. So they've got to look either on brand or be stand out enough to stop somebody from scrolling and to then start reading your words.
Right. And we're going to talk a lot, I know, about how to take an image and 5 simple things that you can do to that image just to make them pop. What are people, you talk about scrolling, and it doesn't really matter where you're scrolling, whether that's Instagram or on a website or on LinkedIn. What are people looking for in an image? And I guess it's not a conscious thing, right? It's the brain somehow doing something, they're seeing an image and they're making an instant judgment. What are they looking at?
Well, the subconscious side of things, the brain is looking at how it's composed, the lighting, the style, and the style across is the same across any creative. So whether that's graphic design, whether that's illustration, whether that's photography, even painting, all of that, there is a certain set of rules that our brain just naturally sees and thinks, "Oh, that's a really great image." And most people won't know what they are, but understanding what those are is just sort of the first step to getting a really great image. And all the images across time that we've got as the best images in the world all adhere to that, to some of those rules at least, because otherwise we just wouldn't see them and think, wow, they're amazing.
And I guess that one of the problems that a lot of people watching or listening to this will have is that they're not experts and they'll just take a quick snap, throw it up and say, yeah, that'll do. But what they don't realize is that a potential hirer or a potential client is looking at that. And it could be the difference between let me reach out and chat or contact,
Mhm.
or I don't like that and I'm going to scroll past.
Yeah, we all have our own natural people that we will be attracted to or be drawn to. And I think that by showing, having a great photograph of yourself in a comfortable situation that you're, um, it just shows who you are. People are going to stop and go, "Oh, I like that person," and then that image will take them to your profile. Then they're reading all the great words that you've got, and then they're looking at what it is that you can do for them or how you can help them. And yeah, massively important. I'm definitely somebody that looks at the image before anything else.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about food quite a lot because I think it's a subject that, again, this is a business podcast. And so LinkedIn's the natural, but food is a really good reference point because you get menus through the door. You look at websites of restaurants or takeaways. You even go to a shop window and look at the photographs and you make an instant judgment on them. What difference does it make when the image, is right, when they've been through your 5 basic tips and they've transformed an image from something which is not very appealing to something which is suddenly now more appealing? What's the shift? What's the difference?
I think it's just an instant, okay, I'm going to keep reading. So whereas you get a menu from a takeaway that's got images that they've taken on their phone that they've just snapped and they've put up. They're dull. They don't really show the food in any kind of great way. And you get the same type of menu, which we almost always have multiples of the same types of food in terms of menus in our houses. You get the same kind of food that you want, and you look at it, and the images are bright, they're colorful, they've had some care taken in how they've been set up and shot. So whether that was them or a photographer, but it doesn't have to be a photographer. All you have to do is think about how you've laid the plate out and then done a bit of editing afterwards, and the image just pops. And you're going to look at one and think, oh, that looks pretty unprofessional. And then look at the other one and think, oh, that looks really good. I'm going to try there.
And that's the journey that we want to take people on today, isn't it? We're not trying to get people to become professional retouchers. We're just trying to get people to be aware of the images that they post and make some simple tweaks. Can I ask you about one more thing? Again, returning to LinkedIn profile images, and I'm speaking from experience here. If you don't like your own image, you don't like the way you look, yeah, in my brain, no amount of editing is going to make me look attractive. And I'm sure that other people will relate to that. So is it still worth me investing the time in fixing my image, making myself look as good as I can?
I think you have to just take a step back. And when I was starting to do videos, somebody told me I hadn't done any yet. And somebody said to me, because I didn't like how I looked or sounded or all those things. And they said that if you You go out into the world as a person networking, dealing with clients, dealing with customers every day. That's you. That's how everybody sees you. So the photo of you, the videos of you, the images of you are what everybody sees every day anyway. So if you're not, nobody really likes getting their photo taken necessarily. But you know, if you've got a nice setting, again, you're thinking about the shot a bit, you've put yourself in a position where you're in a location that you like and you take the photograph, all you're doing is brightening up the colors. You're just enhancing you're brightening yourself up, you're changing exposure, you're just creating a slightly better visual for people to see. It's not changing you because you can't change you and you wouldn't want to because that's who you are, but it's just giving people the best possible version of that image that will hopefully attract the people that you want to attract. So
Yeah.
not necessarily, and also have people who aren't necessarily drawn to you kind of keep going because those aren't the people you want to draw in anyway.
Yeah. And you and I both know Jack Ralph, and we had him on the show. And of course, one of his things is just be yourself. And
Yeah.
a lesson that I've learned through doing this, I don't like the way I sound, I don't like the way I look, but get over yourself, right? Because it's exactly as you say, you know, I am who I am and you are who you are. And,
Yeah.
you know, get over it and just go out
It's
there.
who we are every day. We literally go out and talk to loads of people every day, and this is what
Exactly.
it is. So
Yeah.
why you don't want to change that because what you don't want to do, and it's the same with any editing, any retouching, you don't want to change the image so much that it's no longer what it is. You
Yeah.
want it to look like what it's supposed to be, whether that's a product, a person, a location. Otherwise, it's faking it, and people then won't trust you.
I'd like to dive into that more because we when we were preparing this, we talked about AI. And right now, a load of people are just going, I'll get an AI image and it's photorealistic and it looks like it could be real, but actually it's not reflective of the person or the
Yeah.
product or the service. It should we be using AI to create images?
I think that it's an interesting conversation I had with a couple of women from one of the groups that I'm a part of the other week because they do use AI to put themselves into locations that they aren't in. And I think it really depends on the tool. I think if the tool is able to keep you looking like you and is just placing you in places that maybe you aren't, but you're talking about, I don't necessarily see that being a problem. The problem I have is when people are using AI to create people that don't exist, so AI models, or are using it to as a filter so that you then kind of don't look like you anymore. So skin texture, tone, all those things. And there are some images out there. There are some people out there that you see on LinkedIn where their photos are just so overdone that
Mm.
they look like they're not real anymore. And I just think that's not very representative of who you are. And if I was to then walk up and meet that person in person, you would think, oh, you might not even recognize them.
Yeah.
So there,
Um,
we have a job to keep that
yeah.
authentic.
I have no hair anymore, right? I'm just too old. My hair's gone. And, you know, the whole thing of like, should you wear a wig comes into it. And I mean, of course I don't want to wear a wig, but I can just imagine if you did, and, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm married, right? But imagine you went out and you met someone and they said, oh, I really like your hair. And then you sort of take the wig off and go, oh, by the way, you're just faking it, aren't you? And it must be
yeah,
the same for your LinkedIn image or, you know, you take a picture of the food that you serve in your restaurant or your takeaway or whatever, and it looks amazing. And then the real thing turns up and it's
yeah,
disgusting.
yeah. I think there's also a big use of people not even using their own images and just creating AI imagery of food, saying this is what it is. You can prompt whatever you want, and if your prompt is good enough, it will give you the image back. But yeah, if that's not what you're serving or how it looks when it comes out, then people are never going to come back, no matter how
Yeah.
much it's good. People will stop
Yeah.
believing what you're showing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now we're going to get into your 5 tips in a second, and you've left behind a handout. Now, some people will be watching this on YouTube, and we're going to try and put in some pictures to demonstrate what we're talking about. But of course, if you're listening, it will make no sense, and I apologize to you. But you can download your guide, and in your guide, you've got before and after shots, and you've got some recommendations for how to create a great image. So it's a really, really good download. Let's dive into your handout. So um, it's called Editing for Impact, and you've gone through 5 simple tips that anybody who's watching or listening can take one of their photographs. We've got several examples, but it may well be your profile image, and
Mhm.
you can apply 5 simple changes to it to transform it from ordinary, unrecognized, sort of forgetful or forgettable, I guess is the word, sorry, to something which has more impact and is more memorable. You've got 5 points, and we're going to start from the top, and we'll just briefly touch on the 5 key changes you're making. The first is straighten and crop balance. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. So I think a lot of times when we're just snapping photos away, especially if you're outside or you've taken something ad hoc and you then end up thinking, oh, that looks good. They're not always level. So if you're looking at a horizon, any type of photo, if there you've got a horizon and it's on the skew, if you're thinking that's not a great photo. So it's
Right.
just looking at that. So you're looking at the background, you're looking at maybe the table, whatever the element is, and you're just making sure that when you're looking at it, it's not off to the side. We're kind of nice and straight. Because as soon as somebody that's so easy to see that if something is not flat, not straight or horizontal, our brains will just see it. And it's a really big turn off. It's such a visual thing.
So that sounds quite subliminal almost. It's not sort of something that I would critique the photo and say, oh, look, it's not straight. My brain's done it
Mm,
for me already, and it's made a decision.
yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things that we just automatically see and think, oh no, no, no. It's just
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. And that could be verticals too, right? Buildings and things. And then cropping. What's cropping?
The cropping is so cropping is making the image a bit smaller. So you're getting rid of all the white space that you don't need. So if we look at us right now in the way we're set up, I've got space over here, and you've got space on both sides, and it's just about how you want the image to look in its final spot. If you were wanting to just see a very specific element of an image, you would crop it in nice and tight so that you didn't have all this white space, is what we call it, all this space around to kind of distract. You want people to look specifically at the product, if it's your profile photo. You don't need all this kind of extraneous stuff. So it's just cropping the image down so that you're getting all its best bits.
Right. So if it were a LinkedIn image, for example, you've got like a passport photograph sized image. And if I'm tiny in the middle of that, I should crop in so that I
Yeah,
fill the area more.
absolutely. Yeah, because we want to see you. We don't need to see all the stuff around you.
Great. The second one is adjusting exposure and contrast. They sound very technical.
They
What are
do, but they're
they?
not.
Right. What are they?
So exposure is just the brightness of the shot. So a lot of times, especially with food actually, but also where you've got people standing in front of a really bright background, you maybe are darker or the food is a bit darker. And in order to make that kind of really pop, if you adjust the exposure on that image, and you don't have to have fancy tools for these. So in my download, I do list some programs you can have, which are paid for, like Adobe Photoshop and Elements, but there are some online and web-based mobile-based tools that you can use to do this. And you can actually do it in most phones directly anyway. But it's just brightening the image up so that the key thing that you want to be seen is what's the brightest and what you can see and is the focal point of the image. And it isn't sitting in the dark and isn't sort of in the shadows and you can't really tell what it is, especially with, like I said, with food. You want that to be really bright.
Yeah.
And the contrast is the same things. Contrast is just the difference between the lights and the darks. So if you have a really punchy image, it's got lots of really bright colors because it was out in the sun, you might want to actually reduce the contrast a bit. So you're getting a more well-rounded image and it's not quite so black and white or bright, light, and dark. You want to kind of, if you reduce the contrast a little bit, it'll bring a bit more of the details out in some of the areas that maybe you want to see. Or if you've got a really, really overcast type of image or a really flat image where there's not a lot of bright colors, if you increase the contrast, that will just bring those colors out.
And I want to bring it back to our favorite LinkedIn profile images. If I've got one where the exposure or the contrast is wrong, what will I look like in my image?
Well, exposure and contrast really dark. You could be, if you're in front of a little bit like I am now, actually, if there's a really bright background behind you and you're in quite a big amount of shadow, you might not see me at all. Again, contrast wise, it will affect how much of that light and dark there is. If we reduce the contrast a bit, then I'll come out a bit, and the background will go away a bit so that the difference is less. But you really want to make sure that with the exposure, if it's a profile photo, that the main person, you, is looking as bright and as healthy and as straightforward as possible, so that people are looking at you, and again, not looking at the background.
Okay. And I presume I can overdo this as well, right? I can over adjust the
Yes.
exposure or the contrast.
Yeah. So if you put the exposure way too, and you can play around with it as well, and then the different tools will give you different levels of what that looks like. Some are really um some will just get really harsh ones, so you've got a little bit of slider, but other tools like Photoshop will give you a bit more control. But yeah, if you push that right up, the exposure right up, you're just going to be a bright white angel. You won't look like a real person anymore. So you just
Yeah.
have to play around with it a little bit, and it'll depend on, every image will be different.
Yeah. So you need to look at the image, fiddle around a little bit and
Yeah.
see what feels right. And then the third one is correcting white balance. And that sounds very photographic. What is that?
So white balance is just the color that the image is basically. It's kind of more of a color. You could say just adjusting the color balance of the image instead of the white balance. White balance is a more technical term used for the color of light, and how that's translated into photography, and onto photos. So some lights fluorescent lights are usually really green. And so if you're in I don't know, an office setting where you're just taking photos of, you're doing them yourselves in your business, you've got somebody against a white wall and you've got fluorescent lighting, they're going to come out with a bit of a green cast. A lot of phones and things will automatically adjust for that, but not always. So it's just about making sure that the color of you, or especially people, or whatever it is that you're photographing, is true to what it's supposed to be. I mean, you don't all look sickly.
Right. But if I'm not an expert, if I don't know what I'm doing, how do I even know, sort of what to pick? How do I
So
know what the end
there's
result should look like?
Yeah, there's again, a little bit about it needs to appeal to you. We all have a natural sense of what a good image looks like, and having a bit of a play around with an image that's got a green cast on it, will allow you to see what works and what doesn't. There are tools that you can use, and as I said, in the programs that you use or whatever it is, white balance will be a setting that you can adjust. So it will say, it'll have a slider, or it'll have a button or whatever that is, that you can just slide one way or the other, and it'll either make you look more green or it'll make you look more normal. So it really depends on what it is. But I think a lot of this is going to be a little bit about playing around, using the tools and the suggestions that I've put in the guide, and then just seeing what works for you.
Right. Okay. And what about if I wanted to be really artistic and I wanted to look very different and I wanted to deliberately overexpose myself or deliberately look a bit green? I mean, is that allowed?
That's
Or do I?
absolutely. Some people do that, and there's some really interesting stuff there. Really high contrast images. Some people will do that on purpose. So some people will really throw the contrast up, so you're getting a massive black and white difference, or a really big difference in your shadows and your highlights. But it's a stylistic thing. And if that's what you do with most of your stuff, then that becomes your style. And in which case, that's your brand. And then people are expecting that of you.
Right.
If you only do it for one and it was an experiment, that's great. You can post that up and say, "This, I've done this and I've been playing around." It's just about what you like. And I think as soon as you find a style that you like, then you can replicate that across all the different stuff that you use.
Right. And it becomes part of your brand almost, like
Yeah.
it says something about you.
Yeah.
And the fourth one is adjust vibrancy and not saturation. We,
This one's a
we,
little bit more technical,
okay.
slightly, but as I've mentioned in the guide, there it is an option in even on Instagram. You've got a vibrancy versus saturation. Saturation is the amount of color in, so say this image of me here, it's the amount of color that will pop through. So if you increase that, all the colors will come through, and again, as a stylistic thing, somebody might do that, but it will make everything look really unnatural. Vibrancy is just increasing the colors that are already there, increasing how they look in the image, but not making them look fake. So you can't go nearly as far. And again, if you're looking at images that you want to play around with, you can do the saturation sliders, and then all these colors will just fly out, or the vibrancy, which will just make the colors that are already here just look a little bit brighter. And it's a
Right.
difference because the saturation looks fake. Vibrancy doesn't tend to. So you tend to be able to get away with making the colors look nicer. So say food photography, make them look nicer without making them look fake.
Got it. Okay. And then the final one is spot healing. So removing
Yeah.
unwanted object from the image.
Yeah, so I think this is slightly less so for things like your profile picture, although it will depend on what it is that you're using. And if you've done a really nice selfie that you're super proud of and you want to edit it, but it's got some bits in the background that you want to get rid of, this will work as well. But it is a big thing for product photography, that kind of thing, just to get rid of little elements that are distracting. So the example that I've put in the guide, and I'll put up here, is some food, and there's a brownie and it's been sliced, and that's fine, and it's on the plate and it looks really nice. But on the second shot, just shows how you can tidy up the amount of crumbs there are. So you want it to look like it's been sliced through. It's not perfect, it's not made of plastic, but you can just tidy it up so it doesn't look quite so messy. So you're still seeing that it's exactly what it is, but it looks just a little bit neater. So it's a bit more palatable. It looks nicer in print or online, and people are going to go, "Ooh, that's really great." The first one would probably be fine, but the second one's just a little bit nicer.
Yeah.
And you
And
can do
if
that with
you're,
your profile photos as well.
yeah. And I've heard that with a profile picture, for example, you shouldn't have other people in the image because no matter how minor they are, it can be confusing for the eye and the brain.
Yeah, and I think it's depending on what it is you're trying to do with your profile picture, who you're trying to bring in. Yeah, you're trying to get somebody to work with you or hire you, and if there's people over here, those people don't count. It's a little bit distracting for people. So a really nice solitary image of yourself front and center in whatever space that is just going to be much more attractive for anybody who's looking to work with you.
Great. And by the way, if you're listening instead of watching, you will have missed Beth pointing to a point on her screen where we're actually going to put some pictures
Yeah.
of the cake for now. But you can go and look at that through the guide. Which one of those do you think makes the biggest difference? If I've just got a photograph and I don't want to go too deep, which one of those things should I do first for the biggest impact?
I think making sure your exposure is right. So if you and because if it's dark and if you can't see somebody, or if the like exposure and contrast, if those are off, um, then people aren't going to be able to see exactly who you are or what your product is. So I think that's the main one. You want your image to be bright, and you want it to be showing exactly what it is that you're trying to show, whether that's a person or a product.
Cool. Now it's a bit of show and tell time. Now we're gonna put on screen a poor image. I think we'll pick the burger because
Okay.
that's really good. So you've got a picture of a burger, and some people's profile photographs might look like a burger as well, of course. But we've got a burger which has been photographed really poorly, and I don't want to eat it. It doesn't look very attractive. And could you maybe step through with me some of the changes you have made, and then we'll show the after to show the big difference
Yeah.
between before and after.
So the burger was shot with sort of bland lighting. It still has the little stick in it to kind of hold it together. There are crumbs on the sides. It's been set up okay. It's got some nice vegetables around it and things, but it's pretty dull and pretty drab. So with this one, exposure and vibrancy were a massive thing. So making sure that I've brightened up the image so that the burger looks attractive. It looks like it's in it's in a place with proper lighting, and that the tomatoes and everything else in there is looking really bright and palatable. You want to with food photography, especially, you want to imagine that you're going to eat this and think, "Well, this is amazing," or you want to think, "I want that because it looks amazing." So yeah, absolutely. Bright exposure was a big one with that, and contrast, vibrancy. But also, I got rid of, and you can do this, and it's just a small thing, but if you think about distracting details. So if you look at an image and you're always looking at the stick sticking out of the top of the burger that's holding it together, that's unnecessary. It's not doing anything to the image. It's not helping the image at all. So you can use the remove tools and the healing tools to get rid of that little stick so that it just looks like you've just got the burger then. And it's not a big thing, but when you take it away, you'll see it makes a massive difference, and you're more likely to stop and look at that image.
Now, I'm a big Apple user, and I've got things like Preview on my Mac, which is free, and on my phone, and even on the Mac, I've got the Photos app, and I can open up a photograph and edit, and there's a button which is almost like auto, and it
Yeah.
applies a lot of these settings for me. If I'm really clueless and I just go, "Yep, I'll just hit that button," am I getting a good enough result, or is it worth me spending a bit of time and adjusting individual sliders and experimenting?
I guess it depends on how good your original image is. So that's a big thing. And that's where taking a little bit of time to set the image up in a way that it's already going to be as good as you can with whatever tools it is you have to take the image means that your edited image is then going to be that much better. The auto tools do work quite well, and they're actually sometimes a really good base point. So I sometimes use them as a starting point for an image and then go in and adjust sliders to change that. And you can do things like that on Instagram, and where you can hit the auto, but then go back in and adjust all those settings. But it gets you to a nice starting point if you don't know where to start.
Right.
And then you can go in and kind of make it look a bit more your own by reducing or increasing those.
And if I've hit the auto button, um, my brain's telling me now that a computer somewhere has done its best job. What would I look at in that image to say, yeah, I think I'll go and adjust white balance or vibrancy? What little signals am I looking for to say I can do a bit more of this myself to make the image even better?
So the auto button's a really great place to start because it takes you right to, especially if you're new at it, it gets you to a starting point. But every image is different, and it really depends on what it is you're trying to get out of that image. So you need to look at what it's done and say, okay, this image of mugs or whatever your product is or your person, it's not focused specifically on that. So it's not done as good a job as I think it needs to do. So I want to actually focus on these. So I'm going to now adjust even more for that specific person or item that it is you're trying to work with, because it doesn't know. You haven't told it this is what I'm focusing on. It's just looked at the overall image and gone, this is the best for everything within this image. But it might be that you want to brighten those bits up because they're the focal point of the image.
Right. And of course, it won't know that that thing beside the mug in the image is not what you want. And it will
Yeah.
not know to remove that. And you can go and remove
Yeah.
that extraneous object.
Yeah. No, it will never know what to remove. It'll only ever auto the colors and the exposure and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to remove something, that's something you have to do yourself. Now, remove tools are all AI because that's how they work. And they take what's around it and they use that information to get rid of whatever it is that you're trying to get rid of. And they're not perfect. So sometimes you have to do it a couple of times. Again, it's a little bit of playing around with it, but normally they're pretty good. And if you've got one big thing that you want to get rid of, it usually does a pretty good job.
Cool. Time for one more show and tell. So we've talked a lot about LinkedIn profile images because, as we've said many times, it's probably the image that people watching or listening to this will deal with the most. And arguably, everyone should go to their LinkedIn image and improve it. So I'll ask you to come up with. We've gone to you've gone to the web and got a random photo of a person, which is badly taken and would be a poor LinkedIn profile image.
Mhm.
No one would want to connect with the person. No one would want to hire them. And you've worked your magic. So you've got a before and after. Can you just talk through
Yeah.
what you have done?
So we're going to be looking at the crop of the image, so making sure that the person is not absolutely dead center, but is cropped in so that we can see their faces, we can see them nice and clearly. We're going to make sure that they're bright, that the image is if I was to scroll past it, I always use if I'm going to scroll past something, but I stop. So that's my gauge, and that's something that everybody can do. If you look at what it is you stop on, use all that. That's your knowledge of how you want something to look. But yeah, so you want it to look bright, you're wanting it to look punchy, a little bit of color in there. And we want to make sure that the person is, and we would make sure that the person is looking at the camera and looking forward. So that was something to make sure of before you take an image. But with this one, that was already the case. We were just making sure that it looked bright and noticeable, and just making sure that that person is going to be who you want to stop and look at.
So just as a quick contrast, on the screen now is the before. We'll leave that for a couple of seconds so people can look at it. And here beside it is the after. And I think you can see the difference is radical. And I would imagine that, as you've described, people scrolling would be much more inclined to stop on that person and think, yeah, I think I will engage with this person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes on LinkedIn, just having a profile picture is a big thing for people,
Yeah,
but you don't want to just jump into putting anything on there. It's not Facebook. It's not. We want it. You want people to stop and look.
yeah,
So it's got to be
absolutely.
something that they're going to be attracted to.
Yeah, cool. So, Beth, thank you. I've learned such a lot. One of the things I've learned from this is, I mean, we touched on it a little bit earlier on. People don't particularly like their face or their image, and you can't change that. But you can make the best of what you have got. And if you're selling a product, if you are providing a service and you want some imagery of that, it's in your best interest to make that look as good as you possibly can. So spending a short amount of time going through your 5 very simple steps, which pretty much everybody can do with the tools they've got, makes a radical difference. Now, there will also come a time when they want more guidance. They want somebody who really knows what they're talking about and who's got more tools, more experience, more time. And they're going to say, yep, help me with my imagery. And they may want to reach out to you, Beth. How
Yeah.
do they do that?
LinkedIn is where I'm most active. I've spent a good lot of time sort of building that up. I post videos, all that kind of stuff. I do have a YouTube channel as well. So if you want some tips on how to use the tools, there's quite a few videos on there on how to do that. And Instagram as well. So Instagram is kind of a little bit more on the photography side of things and a little bit more on the creative side of things. But yeah, any of those at all, DM me and get in touch and we can have a chat.
Cool. And you do a weekly competition, don't you, on LinkedIn?
I do. Spot the fakes. It's just me having something fun that I enjoy doing. So have an image I add 3 things into it, and it's just about guessing what those 3 things I've added are. Sometimes it's easier than others. But yeah, it's just a bit of fun midweek. It happens on a Wednesday, so you can keep an eye out for that and join in.
I have a confession to make, Beth. I've looked at those and thought I'm going to join in. I've never yet spotted anything that I think, yeah, that's fake. I'll have a go. So I clearly don't know what I'm looking at, but I'm sure other
it's
people will.
It's worth just having a go of anything, just looking and seeing, because sometimes it's your brain actually kind of does know,
Yeah.
and some of them
Yeah.
just look a little off. I try really hard for that not to be the case, but
Yeah.
you know,
You're clearly very good at what you're doing, is what I'm trying to say. So,
thank you.
Beth, thank you enormously. 1.7 seconds is not long for somebody to make an impression based on an image, and it can take 3 or 4 minutes to go through your steps, improve your image, and make that 1.7 seconds count. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much indeed for what you have done to prepare. Thank you for spending the time to record. Your download is amazing. Obviously, it's very visual. It's well worth downloading just to have a look at. So I encourage everybody who is watching or listening to go do that. And you can find it at buildyouredge.org/downloads. So Beth, thank you so much for the time you spent with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great talking about it. One of my favorite things to do.
I can see it's your passion. So thank you very much. Thank you, Beth, for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. See you next time.